Here on Locked On Grizzlies, we never lost our joy for basketball. We never lost our smile, Jimmy Butler. Damichael Cole and I have had it this entire time, and we are excited to bring that joy to you, everydayers, dear listeners, dear viewers. Let's start off talking about Jimmy Buckets saying no thanks to the Memphis Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, chief waster of time, apparently, on social media, Joe Mullinax, at Joe Mullinax. The sad part is I feel like I came up with one of my best fake trades ever. In the hours before the news from senior NBA insider Chris Haynes that Jimmy Butler was actually not interested in going to the Memphis Grizzlies, I thought I did good work, but no, never mind. Don't worry about that, Jimmy Buckets. Don't worry that I made the Memphis Grizzlies a championship contender with you in the fold. Forget about poor little podcasting Joe. That's fine. Thankfully, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal. He is going to bring some semblance of sanity to this episode, because if it was a solo show, I would just be ranting and raving for the next 30 minutes. Thankfully, Damichael is here and will keep me focused. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We're free and available here at Locked On Grizzlies as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. We have a Locked On Daily newsletter that you should definitely be checking out, lockedondaily.com. It's free. Grizzlies content sent directly to your inbox. Make sure that you're checking us out there, as well as being an everydayer to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Damichael, like I said, I need to calm down for a second, so I'm going to let you kind of lead the charge here for a moment.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about how, and again, you are one of the more in tune with the Grizzlies people out there. You never really bit on the Jimmy Butler to Memphis stuff. I didn't feel crazy for biting as hard as I did.
No, you shouldn't
because
have. Yeah.
they were the betting favorite. Again, gambling is a societal ill unto itself that we could do a Locked On gambling podcast sponsored by FanDuel if we really wanted to, right? That's different. That has nothing to do with how the Memphis Grizzlies do their business, okay? But they were the betting favorite. So that tells you that somebody somewhere thought they knew something. Clearly, they didn't know as much as they thought. Jimmy Butler sends notes to the Grizzlies and other organizations. Kevin O'Connor is reporting, that one of the teams is the Milwaukee Bucks. So that's two teams that have legitimate championship aspirations that Jimmy Buckets is saying no thank you to. This was never about your basketball joy. This is never about having your smile and losing your love of the game. This is now, and Josh Lloyd tweeted about this, and I reposted it on X. This is about a max contract. It's always been about a max contract. There's one place that is crazy enough to pay him a max contract, and that's the Phoenix Suns. If he doesn't go to Phoenix, he's staying in Miami. And go with God, right? Enjoy that experience. Clearly, it's working out for you right now, Jimmy Buckets.
Yeah, you're 100% onto something there. I think the idea that at the end of the day, this is about right now getting to that place who's going to pay him the big bucks, and that's Phoenix. So I think a lot of people, in the league circles think that that's where Jimmy is trying to kind of route himself to, in a way. But from the Memphis angle, I'll start with this, Joe. I'm going to go give an analogy, and maybe a story or a fiction story here as we talk about how the Jimmy Butler Memphis thing. Think of it like this. Think of it as you're in a classroom, and this is before you were married, Joe. Obviously, you're in a classroom, and
shout out to Mrs. Mullinax. Shout out to Mrs. Mullinax.
Yes, shout out to Mrs. Mullinax. You're in a classroom, and there's a pretty girl in the classroom. And everyone thinks she's attractive, but you haven't said anything to her yet in terms of you haven't shot your shot at her, so to speak. But the pretty girl goes out of her way to say, hey, I'm not interested in you. I think that's kind of some of what this situation is
That is an excellent analogy. I have a lot of firsthand experience with that.
All right.
Aside from Mrs. Mullinax, shout out to Mrs. Mullinax.
Yeah.
Aside
she
from
said
that,
yes.
lots
That's
of
all.
firsthand
That's all that
experience.
matters.
She said yes, and she's regretted it every day since. No, I'm just kidding. But that's an excellent analogy, partner.
Yeah. And to go a little further in detail here, I want to be clear. I don't think that that's saying that you weren't interested in the girl, like you didn't think the girl was free. It's like, it's not saying that. Like, of course the Grizzlies probably had some interest there, but from what I've gathered and what I believe, I think that it was kind of stretched in a way. They were the betting favorites more so, I think, just because they make a lot of sense from a financial standpoint. They're playing a rookie at the position right now that Jimmy Butler would potentially jump into the starting lineup at. So they make the plug and play sense. They have the assets, they have the financial figures, to make it work. So, and they're, at the time when these betting odds were what they were the number 2 seed in the West. It made all sense in the world for the Grizzlies to be one of, if not the betting favorite for a guy like Jimmy Butler. But I don't think a lot of that was based on real hard intel. I never got the sense that an offer was made or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, Jimmy Butler says no thanks to the Grizzlies as you've outlined it. But at the same time, the Grizzlies never really just went full-fledged and said, this is the guy we're going to go. It was not like the Dorian Finney-Smith situation. When you looking back on that one, that had real legs. What you heard about the Dorian Finney-Smith stuff, that was real. The Jimmy Butler stuff feels like one that was more stretched, and it's the star factor, right? He's a star player. There have been some things that have been, said on both sides, whether it's from Miami, whether it's from, Jimmy's camp or whatever. So you take a lot of that stuff and you can't take all of it for 100% fact. But yeah, I do, in my opinion, there was interest. And there should be interest, but it's more so like, hey, Jimmy Butler's going to be traded. Let's see what that's about. There wasn't an offer made or anything like that.
No, that makes sense. And again, your analogy was spot on. I really liked that. I think that for me, what I want to stress is this is not sour grapes. And I said that on the Locked On Now that I posted yesterday about this. This isn't sour grapes. Like Jimmy Butler, I have been one of the ones beating the drum the loudest, right? Matt Moore at HP Basketball. He and I, have known each other for a while in blogging and podcasting circles. And this is one of the few things we've gotten into a pseudo argument about was Jimmy Butler on the Grizzlies, because Matt loves the Grizzlies. That's his team besides the Denver Nuggets. And he just doesn't see the fit with Butler. I've talked myself into it, especially if Brandon Clark got to stick around as part of the process.
Yeah.
Now that it's over, looking back on it, I will never fault a player for wanting to make as much money as they can. I've talked about that numerous times here on Locked On Grizzlies. These dudes that we spend hours, you write about it, you have an actual job doing it. I have a paid hobby doing it. They're playing a child's game, right? They're doing something that on Saturday mornings, moms and dads are taking their 6-year-old to watch them dribble around and shoot into a basket. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry at this level. They should get every cent that they can get. But there's cost with everything in life. Jimmy Butler is really losing some of his flexibility making this stand and making this choice. How it plays out is going to be fascinating to watch unfold. But I think that you can't say one thing and then do the other. I know it happens all the time, but that's what bothers me. And that's what makes me feel the most okay with this, Damichael, is, one of the biggest concerns was the mental aspect, right? Can the culture of the Grizzlies withstand a potential cancer like Jimmy Butler? I don't think it's fair to call him a cancer, but he's very clearly interested in his own best interests. You could argue that he should be, but at the same time, Memphis has built something that at least feels a little different than that. At the end of the day, is Jaren Jackson Jr. most concerned about Jaren Jackson Jr.? Probably so. That's why he's playing so well. He's going to get a max contract. Again, earn your money. But Jaren's been here the whole time, right? Jaren is in Memphis. He is a community member in Memphis. He's growing the Memphis Grizzlies franchise on and off the court. Bringing in somebody like Butler, who is not necessarily looking for that, this is kind of an all's well that ends well, not even a flirtation. It feels okay to move on to me.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, he's a great player. It was something that probably could have worked in theory. I never really talked about it, but if I would have, my hiccup with it would have been shooting. Right? Like you need that three player to be, to me, a proficient shooter in the NBA. And Jimmy Butler, for all the things that he's great at, that's not one of the things that he's great at. So I'm okay with looking in a different direction. There are other fits out there that would be better for Jimmy Butler in that case. Whereas with the Grizzlies, same thing. As we get to our second segment, there are other players who potentially, in my opinion, make more sense than Jimmy Butler for them.
It's almost like you've been doing this a while, partner. That's an excellent segue. So we'll leave Jimmy Butler in the past, right? Kicked to the curb. He broke up with us before we could ever break up with him, and that's okay. I've been broken up with plenty of times. Shout out to Mrs. Mullinax, though. She's still around. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about ways that Memphis can move on. What comes next? Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Ultimate GM. I'm a big fan of Ultimate GM, and you should be as well. It is a fun, brand new mobile game that I am excited to talk about. Ultimate College Basketball HC, I should say. If you've ever dreamed about being a college basketball head coach, this is your chance to step into those shoes. In Ultimate College Basketball HC, you control every detail of your program, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling NIL deals, and managing scholarships. It's all in your hands. And when it comes to game time, you get to draw up offensive plays, set the strategy. The way you play won't just affect the current season. It will shape the future of your school's basketball program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. Here's a special offer from Locked On NBA for its listeners. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCBB, all caps, inside the game store to get a free boost for your program. It's the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. To download Ultimate College Basketball HC, just visit ultimate-cbb.com or look it up at the app stores. Ultimate College Basketball HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. So what comes next, right? We broke up with Jimmy Butler. Gross. Never even liked him anyway. Cam Johnson is the name that really kind of stands out, right? Mm-hmm. Cam Johnson is the name that really stands out. There's the built-in relationship. For those of you that are on YouTube, I used air quotes aren't on YouTube. Used air quotes there. Memphis was very close to acquiring Dorian Finney-Smith, as you mentioned. They were real. That was very real, almost at the finish line, and then the Lakers swooped in last minute. How do the Grizzlies move forward from here? Because Cam Johnson seems like the most obvious fit. There's the built-in conversations that have already happened, a framework of a deal that could be built upon. Is that as easy for Memphis as, okay, we don't want to have, as well as he's playing, Jalen Wells maybe shouldn't be a starter in a playoff series for a championship contending team. Right. How do you upgrade from here? What comes next for Memphis now that the Jimmy Butler option, even if it was never really on the table, is fully off of
it? I think Cam Johnson is definitely one that, you kind of kick the tires on a little bit further, but I'm going to pivot a little bit in a second here, Joe, but I'm going to start with your Cam Johnson point, and I'll say this. I think Cam Johnson will be a bidding war, and the Grizzlies, as long as I've covered them and as long as I've gotten to know, the way that they like to work, and this as well, Joe, they're not a bidding war type organization. And some people, frown upon that idea. Like, some people think you should be able to, or want to outbid other teams for key players and things like that. But when you're in bidding wars, what happens is you end up paying more than likely, most of the times, you end up paying much more than what that player would typically go for if it was, not a bid war. So I think Cam Johnson, at the end of the day, you're going to see a bunch of teams, and the Grizzlies aren't the only team that are stocked with draft capital. Like, the Thunder make a lot of sense to be involved in those conversations. And look, no matter how you want to slice it, the Thunder can put a better offer out there than the Grizzlies just because of the assets that they have. The Grizzlies have great assets as well, but if you want to talk about a team that's armed, with a bunch of draft picks and some talented players as well, they have that just like Memphis does. So with all that being said, what about Brandon Ingram? Joe?
Interesting.
Now, look, you remember, like I remember, in the summertime, he was a trendy name. Then it got quiet. It got quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Now look, Brandon Ingram is a free agent at the end of the season, right? So there is,
and another guy that is almost certainly looking for a max contract.
He's looking for that money. He's looking for the money. So with all that being said, you would like to pursue a guy like that with the idea of knowing that, hey, there is some security going forward if we make this deal for you. I think that's something that would have to be discussed. I mean, I think he recently made an agency change. He's with Clutch now. And, Clutch ain't taking a chump change. That's not how Clutch operates. So with all that being said, now you look at the parameters of how this will work. And the Pelicans are in a situation where, one, they have a bunch of good wings, and they have talented ones. They have Herb Jones. They have Trey Murphy, who's playing really good basketball. We talked about it. I remember when me and you talked about it. We talked about it as a Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson thing. And Zion Williamson is still hurt right now, just like Brandon Ingram's hurt. But I would say, hey, look, based off what they could do in the draft, what they could get in the draft, I would lean more towards moving Brandon Ingram solely because of the fact that you have ready-made replacements in Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, who are both really good basketball players. He's on the last year of his contract, so I feel like if you don't want to keep him, like if you want to keep him, then that's different. But if you're up in the air on the idea of keeping Brandon Ingram, you got to move him. You got to move him. He's at about $36 million this year. The Grizzlies can easily make that money work. I mean, Joe, you were talking about it on the recent Jimmy Butler episode about them making $48 million work. So in other words, take one of those key players. All you got to do is take one of those key players off, like a Luke Kennard or Brandon Clark type contract or somewhere in there. You take off a decent sized middle $10, $11 million contract. And you can make that work if you use the Jimmy Butler parameters of a deal. It's a little bit different of a situation. He's younger, but I think he makes sense. He's not your Jimmy Butler, Cam Johnson level defender. He's not a terrible defender either, but he's not the same level of those dudes. But at the same time, what intrigues me about him is the offensive side of the basketball. This is a guy in his last 6 seasons in the NBA who's averaged over 20 points per game, and even going beyond that. He's making it's small sample size, but the intent is there. He's shooting over 6 3-point attempts per game this year, and he's made over 2 a game. When you think of Brandon Ingram in the past, you think of mid-range shooter, not really, high usage, on 3-pointers. He's shifting, more into taking more threes, which is what the Pelicans needed from him, and which is, if he comes to Memphis, that's exactly what they would need. But look, if you're fixated on the idea that the Grizzlies need to go star hunting, Cam Johnson's going to be a bidding war. If you wanna up the ante and go for it, then so be it. But if you want another option as well, Brandon Ingram is one that I think makes a lot of sense.
Denny Avdija out in Portland also might make a lot of sense.
I said star hunting, Joe. I said star hunting.
Yeah, you did. That's fair. Denny's not a star. That's a fair point. And that's probably a topic for another episode. Other guys, other than the ones that the non-star hunting edition. I don't hate the Brandon Ingram idea. Again, it's kind of like Jimmy Butler. I thought I was going to hate that when I first heard it. I talked myself into it. You just kind of talked me into Ingram. And again, what was the biggest hang up, at least for me, and I think you agreed, parting with Brandon Clark, right? Brandon Clark has been a part of this since 2019. Who the heck is going to be your third or fourth big? Losing Clark hurts. In this deal, you just take him out. It's Marcus Smart. It's Luke Kennard. It's John Conchar. The money matches almost perfectly. So there's room for this to really kind of be a fit. And all it might cost is a future first. And you have the opportunity to really look into a Brandon Ingram fit with the Grizzlies, even if it's short term, right? Because Ingram, again, he's another guy that's searching for the money. Even if it's a short term situation, Memphis has a window that is opening, right? Maybe it's been open earlier than this, but we can start talking about them now that the key cogs in the machine are 25, 26 years old. This is the traditional title window. It's starting now.
It's here.
So The fact that they were looking at Dorian Finney-Smith, that tells you that they are looking. I wouldn't be surprised if these kinds of names, not just Cam Johnson, but Brandon Ingram, Avdija, and others, you start hearing more and more about that. And you know who that really helps at the end of the day? It really helps the content creators, baby. Those sweet downloads, those sweet clicks. Bring them on. Damichael Cole and I are looking forward to them. Let us know in the comments. Hit us up on X. What comes next for you, right? Is it a Cam Johnson? Is it a Brandon Ingram? Did Damichael just talk you into it like he did for me? Or is it as simple as we have Brandon Ingram and Jimmy Butler at home? His name is GG Jackson, and he is coming back soon. I'm sure Damichael Cole will provide an update on the status of newly practicing GG Jackson coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. One of my favorite memories from this past year was going to WrestleMania 40, WWE events. I've loved wrestling my whole life. The energy, the excitement, it's unforgettable. Now Game Time has made it easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can find amazing deals, see the view from your seat before buying. You can also find a super deal that can be particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So we talked about Jimmy Butler. I'd already said we had moved on. I had to bring him up because we're summarizing the episode. I'm not talking about Jimmy Butler anymore. Okay.
Yep.
He's gone. Right. No longer in the vision.
So long.
Brandon Ingram maybe in the vision. Right. Maybe a Cam Johnson if the Brooklyn-Memphis relationship can be mended. GG Jackson taking shots before the game against the Mavs on Monday night was really good to see. He looks like he's thickened up, and we forget, or at least I forget, how old is he? He's like still 19 years old, right?
He's 20. He just turned 20 in December.
He's 20, just turned 20. That's right. Thank you. Good catch. So he just turned 20. He's not even legally allowed to drink yet.
Nope.
Right? So this guy is still developing mentally, physically. We have no idea what GG Jackson could be. I have said all along that I kind of envisioned him going into the season as a sixth-man scorer off the bench. What if GG Jackson is the guy that this team needs, and Memphis just needs to be patient? I need to be patient and allow for the team to get healthy. GG, obviously, Ja is nearing a return. You talked about that on yesterday's show. We don't know what this team healthy looks like. I forget that all the time. How do we upgrade? How do we get better? They're starting a rookie at the 3. That's because they have so many dudes out right now. We have yet to see what this team actually is, and GG Jackson is a big piece of that is nearing a return.
He's a big piece of that. And I think, again, that's not the flashy answer. That's the your less, dramatic answer when it comes to all the trade talks and things like that. But at the end of the day, the Grizzlies have a couple guys who should be very impactful players who are just waiting in the wings, right? They're getting healthy, and GG is one of those two dudes. Vince Williams Jr. being the other one. But yeah, with GG Jackson, there's a lot to kind of unpack here, and but yeah, you touched on something that's really important. He's getting close. He's going down to practice with the hustle. They're gonna see how that goes. He's been doing more on the court basketball activity as of late. I've seen him doing more. He's breaking, he's really breaking sweats. Like he's working really hard to get back. But y'all got a good one for you. Just a little tidbit. GG Jackson last season, I believe the NBA had him at about 215 pounds. Joe, GG Jackson's 235 pounds now.
I thought he looked bigger. I see, and we didn't even talk about that before the show.
We didn't.
That's just the old ball coach in me, looking at a young prospect and saying he's put on some muscle mass.
It's muscle. It's 235 pounds. That ain't a boy anymore.
That's grown man stuff.
You look at him play last season, and we talk about like how good he was, but there were so many times Gigi Jackson would drive to the rim and he'd easily be pushed off of his spot because he was a 19-year-old kid who was 215 pounds. At least that's what he was listed as on the NBA site. He's not that anymore. He's bigger. He's more muscular. And he's going to be able to better absorb, the contact and things like that. Now, there's always the other side of when guys put on muscle as well. You always wonder, especially in the NBA, that's why it's always this conversation about football players and basketball and things like that, because they train differently and they train differently. But with Gigi Jackson, I think now the question is going to be, how does this affect his jump shot? Because we saw it with Jason Tatum. You remember he first came in the league, he had that nice, fluid, silky jumper, and Jason Tatum all of a sudden, became this bulkier, muscular guy. I think LeBron went through it at certain points of his career. But at the end of the day, it happens. Guys put on muscle, and then there's an adjustment that has to be made. Sometimes it really doesn't matter. Grayson Allen was a really good shooter last season. He put on a lot of muscle coming into this season, and I don't know exact numbers off the top, but it seems like he's still shooting the three-pointer very well. So, sometimes it doesn't really matter, but it is something, worth looking at. But at the same time, something that else is going to be noticeable is the fact that when Gigi Jackson gets downhill, and I mean, we know how good his footwork is, his his slow steps, as we talked about, recently, like with the Grizzlies incorporating that more. He was one of the guys that were there in Summer League who worked a lot with Noah LaRoche on that move of the slow steps. And we saw him using it a lot out there in Las Vegas. So with all that being said, him putting on weight is huge. And I say all that just to get back to our original point. I got to see what Gigi Jackson's going to be capable of. Trade deadline isn't until February 6th. A lot of pieces don't start moving until February. If you're talking about Gigi Jackson being back in the next week or so, I think it's very realistic that you'll get a good sample size of if he can be an impact player for this team that eventually impacts how aggressive they are at the deadline.
And obviously, it doesn't have to involve Gigi Jackson at all, right? It can involve his health making somebody like a Jake LaRavia or even a Santi Aldama, if they're not in your long-term plans, especially a guy like Santi. Like, Jake's not in the long-term plans because of the limitations they have to sign that guy back. That might be the reason why LaRavia stays in Memphis, because no one's going to trade for him. But Santi is a great example. If you're not going to be able to afford Santi Aldama long-term, you've got Gigi Jackson under contract. If he can play the four, which is 6'9", 235 pounds, he can 100% play the four in the National Basketball Association, plus still being able to play the three, of course. He's still young enough and agile enough where he could do both, be a true combo forward. It gives you greater flexibility in terms of where you're comfortable trying to find that upgrade to the roster if you think it's needed. I'm curious to see how he fits, especially alongside, we have not seen him next to Ja Morant much at all. Right. So Ja returns, gets healthy. How that working relationship operates, I have concerns about that. I've articulated that a lot. There's a reason why I liked him as a sixth man scorer off the bench, because I didn't think he would make sense as a scorer with the starters. That was before we saw this new look offense. That was before the transpirings of the last few months. I'm interested in gathering data like you just alluded to, partner, and we'll have some games, it looks like, to do that, with Gigi coming back hopefully in the next few.
That's going to be crucial. And he's coming off a major surgery. So it's going to be a ramp up here that we're going to see. And you know how that goes, especially in Memphis. But at the same time, Gigi Jackson just had a terrific rookie year. Very small sample size, but everyone could see the talent, he has a lot to his game. I cannot wait to see him progress defensively as well. What can he be, as a defender? We saw towards the end of the season, the Grizzlies start putting him in situations where he was guarding, he was the point of attack guy. He was guarding point guards, bringing the ball up the floor. We saw him a lot of times guarding, bigger guys. And now he has more muscle to be able to handle those matchups. And hopefully he's able to be, healthier, going forward in his career now that he's put on, some of that muscle as well. But yeah, Gigi Jackson kind of holds a lot of the cards to me. Everyone else, you might not agree because, I say, like Joe likes to say, are you trying to win a championship or not? Banking on a 20-year-old in a playoff series is something. But at the same time, look, if Gigi Jackson is as good as some of us think he can be, if you give him the next few months to continue to get some of those reps, he has playoff talent to me.
He definitely provides some scoring pop that the Grizzlies offense will need in a playoff series. Let Damichael and I know what you think. Gigi Jackson coming back, starter, reserve. I'm sure he's going to get lots of opportunities to do lots of different things, hopefully coming up here soon. Speaking of soon, on our next edition of Locked On Grizzlies, we have a big-time game coming up here, Damichael, one that we haven't seen much of this season, but we're going to see a lot of here in the next couple of weeks. The Houston Rockets are in town, a big one for the Grizzlies. Current, roughly tied for the 2 seed. Houston is a pretty impressive young team in their own right. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about that coming up on our next episode.
Yeah, for sure. Look, Houston, that first game, I was down there. They put it on Memphis. They definitely they beat the Grizzlies good. They used that physicality. And, it's going to be interesting to see how Memphis matches that this time around. But, yeah, that's kind of going to be the name of the game when those two teams play. We'll talk more about that in addition to some practice things as well. The Grizzlies also practice potentially tomorrow. So, yeah, a lot to look forward to as we get into that.
Looking forward to it. So make sure you're with us on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies to hear all that and, of course, more. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts. We're proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. So make sure you're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, literally anywhere you get a podcast. You can make Damichael and I a part of your Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time an episode drops. Make sure you're subscribing to LockedOnDaily.com. Go there. Free daily newsletter on Locked On Grizzlies content. I write it each and every day. No artificial intelligence here. It's Joe Mullinax writing up words just like he used to just about every day over at the Old School Grizzly Bear Blues. Now doing it for you in your email box each and every episode, each and every day, Free daily newsletter, LockedOnDaily.com. Go and subscribe to the Locked On Grizzlies free daily newsletter. Again, LockedOnDaily.com. For Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. Big game coming up against the Houston Rockets. We'll be talking about that and so much more. You know who we won't be talking about? Jimmy Butler. Have a good one.